For this practice for the watercolor project, we are doing this watercolor and brush practice, number 1, in the series of 5 worksheets. This one is worth 10 points, and the whole goal here is to develop your skills in creating hard edges on each of these, which means that you go right up to the black outline with the paints, but not outside of the outline, and right up to the outline without white paper between the color of the paint and the outline. To get started, you want to clean your brush out on one side of your water container, tap out the excess dirty water, and pick up clean water in your brush. And then you're going to select any color you like. It could be any color from your tray, and you're going to hydrate that color. The best way to do it is to have enough water in your brush and rotate your brush into the cake of watercolors, rotating it and patting it as you go. Don't scrub it. Just rotate to lift it up. You're hydrating the color so that you have enough to go into the square. So you don't want to run out, right? So you want to load it up with enough that you can create a nice thick paste of that color, enough that you don't run out for that whole one shape. So I'm adding more water and rotating and creating a pasty thickness of the watercolor. You don't want to have too much water there that it's thin. You want to have enough water there in the watercolor that it's a paste, and you have enough that you don't run out. So I'm just rotating it as I pat. I'm not dragging it around with aggressiveness. I'm just doing it gently to saturate the lower lying areas of watercolor. I think I've got enough now. Now I'm going to take my brush and I'm going to unload a little bit of it into the first square at the left-hand side, just unloading it so it isn't quite so heavily loaded. And then I'm going to pull my brush along the left-hand side inside the shape. I'm right-handed, so I want to see where my brush is going. So I'm working on the left hand on the inside, and I pull the brush toward myself, creating the edge of the shape with the edge of the brush. I stop before I get to that line because I could go outside of that edge, and I rotate my paper so that I can pull it toward myself again. I put the tip of my brush right into that corner, and I pull it toward myself again. Stop before I get to that one. I can load up with more paint if I need to. I could also take it from that pot that I unloaded there, and I pulled it toward myself again, stopping, and once again pulling it toward myself. I'm going to load up my brush with some of those that paint that I already have there, and I want to work quickly enough that this outline of color doesn't dry on me before I fill it in with the color, which is the next step. You want to make sure that it's nice and even, and don't let too much white paper show through. The goal with this one is the objective that you're getting graded on is to have those hard edges, but also have a nice, thick, even coverage that is opaque with very little white paper showing through, if any, and having it nice and evenly covered with the color. If you go too slowly, it's going to have outlines that show up, and if you have it too thin, it's going to have variations on light and dark, or pure and less pure. So that's the first step. The next step is we're going to add more water to the same pot of the same color, and we're going to go with more water with each one all the way across. So this one's going to have some white paper showing. This is going to have more white paper showing. This one more white paper showing. This last one very little of the color and more white paper showing, but evenly applied and with hard edges still. So you just add more water to your brush each step into the same pot. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm not going to get more pigment. I'm just going to take what's already hydrated and mix it in a little bit with my brush, and then it should be thinner than this is because I have more water in the same amount of paint. So I paint it down following the same steps I did with the previous one, pulling my brush toward myself so I can see where it's going. Creating the outline. And it's a little trickier to get nice, even coverage when it's thinner like this than when it's the pasty, opaquer version of it. Oops, that's what happens when you talk. You go outside of the shape. Remember, that's part of the technical skill, staying right inside that outline. Okay, so the other objective is to fill it in evenly again. Like I was starting to say, it's a little trickier than it is with the opaque when it has more water in it to get it to be nice and even. So you're going to try your best to make it nice and even, but still let white paper show through a little bit more. The next step, same process, more water. I'm adding 6 drops of water this time, or 6 brush loads. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If I had a bigger brush, it would take fewer brush loads to load it up. And because it has more water than pigment this time than it did here and there, it should be thinner and lighter, especially by the time it dries, than it was for either of those previous two. Once again, because it has more water, it's going to be more difficult to have it evenly cover the paper. But try your best, and try your best not to make it as dark as that first one that has more pigment in it, right? So each one should get a little bit thinner with more water, and try your best to get it evenly applied. I'm going a little faster than I should, just so you can see this without watching me paint for 15 minutes. I know it gets boring. So you just kind of drag it around. Don't add more pigment, just drag what you've already got there in your outlines and try to get it as even as you can as you drag it. I'm going both directions. That helps to kind of fill in areas. And you can still tilt and turn it like we did with the watercolor washes. By the way, this is called wet on dry. When your paper is dry, the technique is called wet on dry. My next step is to add more water to my tray of paints. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So notice I count, and I doubled, or I added 2 more brush loads each step. Each one has 2 more brush loads of water. It just makes it easier for me to make sure that as I'm mixing it, I'm not picking up more pigment than I have water in my brush. Once again, you want to pull it towards yourself. You want to be able to see where your brush is going as you go across these. And I'm going to let you figure out, the last one is the same thing. It's just more water and less paint or pigment, right? So it should be a really light version of that color for this last one. More water than pigment will make it work just fine for you. I'm not even going to go back to my tray. I'm just going to use that little pot that's right there on my paper, and I'm going to use what's there to fill it in. So you should be able to see, even on this video, that this is lighter than that by a big degree. This one should be lighter than that one even. So the last one here, absolutely lots more water, very little pigment. I sped it up by just taking a little pigment and putting it in the tray lid and added more water to it. So that's the process for this one. When you're done, it needs to go on the drying rack or somewhere to dry if you're at home, so it stays safe. It should be on a cover sheet with your name on it if it's on the drying rack in the classroom, so you can pick up yours and not somebody else's real quickly and get out of the way. And if you didn't start by writing your name in pencil, name and period at the top of the paper, make sure you do that before you put it on the drying rack. That way, if somebody else picks it up by accident, it's easier to prove that it's yours. So nice, even steps all the way across, creating value changes with the watercolors with hard edges and even color coverage.